look into the element of shock. And again, when we look to shock, shock so much dances together with trauma. And looking into the element of shock, what we saw is, when there is a shock, it's a kind of an awakening of the whole nerve system. And often, an awakening in which there is this movement of dissociation coming forward, this expansion. So, as an example, what I remember is from years ago that I was driving from a dirt road into a real road. And I was just kind of turning on the road when somebody on high speed was entering, from the main road. And I can remember every moment of it. The person was driving in high speed. I could see the fright on his face. And at the same time, the whole atmosphere was absolutely still, silent. And everything seems to move in slow motion. I hit the brake. My daughter was sitting beside of me, so I kind of pushed her back in the chair. And then this car just hit the edge of my car. And it kind of went to the other side of the road and ended up on a big stone, which was on the other side of the road, turning around on the stone. Happily, nobody was hurt in this accident. But the shock of it happening, the awakening which took place, the slowing of the time, the expansion of consciousness, not so much of awareness, the silence which was there. And afterwards, I went out of the car and I was shaking. My whole body was shaking. Like there was such a high energy in that moment. That's a way of looking at it. Such a charge in the nerve system that the nerve system needed to kind of relax itself. And this is all part of shock. And often when nothing serious is happening and we're able to kind of move totally through a shock, afterwards there is this kind of shaking, or there is this kind of release of rage sometimes. As children, we do these little games, you enter a room and somebody is saying boo, and you get a shock. And some people kind of, hate it. They get so aggressive, they want to kill you afterwards. So when you look to this, it's the same. There's this shock. It's like time is standing still for a moment. It's a kind of rupture. Whatever was in your mind is gone. Whatever was your direction in that time is gone. It's like a reset. And again, it's not a problem if we're able to move totally, completely through it. Then everything starts up again. And to be able to move totally through it, often it moves together with a physical release. This can be either shaking or getting very angry or screaming or a release of panic or fear sometimes. So an emotional release. But as long as the release is there, we are able to move back into the body, back into ourselves. So when we are not able to move through the release, and we talked about this yesterday as well, and there's a lot of different moments that we are not able to move through the release. Sometimes it's connected, with shame, that we don't want to kind of, to show the others how deeply we are shocked. So we mask it, we disguise it. We repress the normal reaction of the nerve system. Sometimes, you know, what shocked us and the impact of that is so overwhelming that we kind of immediately move into a kind of survival, or sometimes in a kind of numbness. We don't really are able to contain what shocked us so much. So we kind of stay a little bit in the state of shock, a little bit, you know, disentangled, not really connected, because the impact of what happened is very difficult to contain. And often this is psychological or emotional. It's a total different shock as, you know, when somebody says boo to you, which is moving over your borders, or when there is cruelty or violence expressed towards you. And sometimes when there is cruelty or violence expressed to you, you know, we don't know how to place it, especially when it's somebody who's close to us. We don't know how to relate to it. And then often what we do is we kind of ignore what happens, like it never happened. Because if we not ignore what happened, it's like the relationship will change. Everything what we know, everything what we recognize as normal is changing. It doesn't fit into our psychological world. And basically what's happening then, we start to move into coping behavior. We start to cope with whatever is happening. We move into survival, which is different from a state of shock. This is already where shock is kind of start to move into trauma. And shock and trauma very much are dancing together. So to say it, I'll come back to the thread where I was, but it's important kind of, you know, maybe to give a little bit of a background to it, is it's important to understand that, you know, shock and trauma are dancing together. It's often when we want to release a trauma or a traumatic state we are in, because the trauma in itself is not a problem either. But what is the problem is the traumatic state. It means that we find ourselves, not constantly, but from time to time, into a state of trauma. And a state of trauma is what you could say is a trauma tunnel. And so often, to be able to move out of a state of trauma, it's so helpful to revisit the moment of shock. This is where it started. And yesterday we worked a little bit with this moment of shock. We kind of saw that the shock can be a kind of separation in time. It's like if we have our lifeline, it's like a cut in the lifeline. And so there is the state where we were before the shock, and there is the state where we were after the shock. And sometimes we see that, you know, what was before the shock, some elements get lost. Something is changing. It's what happened before the shock and how we're relating to life, relating to ourselves, relating to our environment, relating socially to others? What was there before the shock? And what was there after the shock? So part of what we did yesterday is this movement, making between before and after and after and before. And this helps to kind of, to mend the cut, which is sometimes in our lives after shock. And it's important to understand that when we look to this moment of shock, and there is a cut in our lives, this has, of course, a psychological, emotional effect, but it has a very strong physical effect as well. It's like our nerve system is never able to totally recover when we are not able to move through the shock. So there is a charge in the nerve system, which creates a charge in the physical body, which can be at cause of a lot of physical complaints. So when you look at somebody's physical well-being, so often what you see that autoimmune disease is often triggered by shock. This can be a loss, a car accident, something which moves over your borders, which is happening in your life. So it's important to work with shock, can also give a lot of physical relief. I'm not saying that it gives a complete healing, but it can give a lot of physical relief. So there is a change in shock, a change partly often in our attitude towards ourselves, our attitude towards life. Because, we relate, and we talked about that yesterday as well, we relate to life according to the patterns we recognize in life. This gives us the feeling, who we are, where we are, and what's going to happen. It gives us a feeling of control of life. And you see this in children, it's very easy. They have certain expectations and a certain pattern and beliefs how things should be. This is especially strong in 10-year-old boys. Most of the 10-year-old boys, they understand how things are working according to rules. 6 o'clock dinner time. This is allowed, this is not allowed. So these 10-year-old boys, they have the tendency to become police officers. If you do something which is going beyond the rules, they tell you exactly, no, daddy, this is not right. You should do it like this. This is the rule. This is how it is. This is how it goes. And this is just an example of, at a certain moment when we understand reality, we kind of build the structure of reality, and the structure of reality of how it should be gives us a model of reality, how to deal with reality. And this is according to our beliefs. And basically, we get shocked all the time. But most of the shocks are not that severe. We're able to deal with it, or we're able to ignore it. As an example, we all have a certain set of beliefs of how a relationship should be. And we have a tendency to look to our partner according to our beliefs of how a relationship should be. This is how our partner should behave. It gives us a structure in which we get kind of, control over how we can express in a relationship, what is expected of us, and what we can expect of our partner, and how our partner should express in a relationship. And as long as this is more or less working, everything is honky-dory. We love each other, things go as expected. Good morning, darling, good morning, my love. I'm going to my work, see you later, kiss, kiss. Everything is safe. All of this is according to expectation. And I make it very simple as an example. We love each other, it's safe, there is a good atmosphere. So, good morning, love, I'm going to my work. And then the love in the hallway says to you, I want a divorce. That's a shock. You didn't see it coming. Where is it coming from? This is a shock. This is totally out of any expectation. So how do we react to this? So there's a lot of different reactions possible. Some of us start to laugh, ha ha ha, funny. Or this is not a nice joke. Some of us are totally devastated, they fall apart. Some of us get very angry. Not now. How could you say this now? I'm just on my way to my work. Irrational, crazy reactions. According to the background of who we are, according to our own personality. Shock. And then what you see is in how we react to such a shock. Is often the background of the trauma we could move in. Is the pain which comes forward, the fright which comes forward, the fear which comes forward, the inability to move on for whatever reason, which is quite personal, comes forward. And at the same time, what you see at that moment, our whole belief system is shattered. Reality falls apart as it was. The honky-dory reality doesn't exist anymore. She is serious. She says, I want a divorce. I make a she from her. It could be a he as well. And our mind starts grasping. What about? What about the children? What about the house? What about this? What about that? And this grasping after the shock, what about? How to survive? Is the grasping to hold on to things, to kind of rebuild a reality which is different. But the atmosphere of the reality which is different is so much connected in what's happening immediately after the shock. The feelings which are there, the beliefs we grasp. And sometimes these are beliefs we already carrying. We were honky-dory with our partner. I just have an extreme example. It's never like this, but to explain a little bit. And then the partner wants a divorce. And then immediately comes another voice forward. You see, you can never trust the women. You can never trust the women. Probably there is somebody else. So where is this coming from? Where are these beliefs coming from? if you give your heart to somebody, they will reject you. Where is this coming from? What did I do wrong? How is it possible that I lost the love of this person? I must be very bad. Very, very basic horror beliefs often, in which we enter a new reality. And often these beliefs are kind of, structures of protection, sometimes from former generations. Structures of protection which are forming at a certain moment if we are not able to move through the trauma, the state of trauma, the trauma tunnel, where we move in. And again, happily, merciful, we are not all the time in a state of trauma, but we triggered into it. This can be through rejection. This can be through a smell, which looks like the smell which was there when we had this traumatic event happening. This can be through a sound. This can be through a sentence. This can be through a certain behavior of somebody else. There is so many different possibilities. This can be by sitting in the car again. And so then when we move into a trauma tunnel, we are at the same time also in a state of shock. It's like the shock is coming forward, but instead of this expansion and which is there is not an expansion, but a contraction. There is a contraction in a very limited reality. We lose our creativity. We lose our common sense. We're not able to see things from different sides anymore. There is only one truth. And often this truth is quite irrational. Colored with an atmosphere. The atmosphere of the shock we had before. The atmosphere of the trauma. Fear, horror, loneliness, rejection, pain, loss. And this is not an either or. This can be an and. Rage. So what I said before, sometimes when somebody is booing us, there is this kind of rage which needs to come out. So if there is a situation in which the rage cannot come out and it forms a trauma, then when it's triggered, we are in the same rage. But then often this rage is not, in no way fit to the event of what is happening. Somebody moves over a border, but we react as if the person is killing us. It becomes a matter of life and death. We're not able to see the point of the other anymore or look through the eyes of the other. We go into this tunnel and there is this rage. And we attack. And this can be a physical attack, but this can also be an emotional attack. This can be pure rejection what comes out towards the other. Go away, go away, go away, go away, go away. I cannot handle you anymore. Go away. But I'm only asking you if you want a piece of chocolate. You know I hate chocolate. It can be as innocent as that. And we're in a tunnel. We lose ourselves. And we know all situations in which this is happening, where we lose ourselves. Then when we look back, we're a little bit ashamed. So we think, shit, how's that possible? And when you look more deeply into it, so when we lose ourselves like this, in a rage, in a fear, in a panic, all of this is possible. It has an emotional content. In isolation, we draw back. We don't connect anymore. We can lose ourselves in the ice cream. Nothing is to touch me anymore. I don't care. I don't feel anything anymore. Or the ice king. So on the background, when we look more deeply into it, there is a pain. And this atmosphere of pain is the same pain as what happened in the shock when we got traumatized. This is the pain we were not able to move through. And this is partly also the pain some of us met yesterday. The unbearable pain, the forbidden pain. The pain which is not allowed in our lives. This cannot be. And every time when this pain is touched, it is like a shock again. It's not allowed. It's unbearable. And this can be connected with loss. This can be connected with rejection. This can be connected with physical well-being, with illnesses, sicknesses. This can be connected with so many different things. But the thing where we were shocked, the thing which brought forward pain, which was unbearable, which is unbearable. Feeling of total isolation, the feeling of not belonging, the feeling of not being part of. The betrayal of the depth of intimacy he felt at a certain moment. I remember as a child that I really, really loved animals. And I had this deep feeling connection with animals. And then there was this dog, and I really, I liked this dog. I gave this dog food. And at a certain moment, I was a little child, I reached out for the dog, and for whatever reason, the dog bit me. It was such a betrayal, such a shock. Beyond any understanding. So, and part of the shock was also, how could you ever safely trust an animal again? And that's the thought. That's the structure of belief which comes forward, the self-protection. But the real question is not, how can you ever trust an animal again? How am I able to deal with the pain and the betrayal and the feeling of betrayal and the ability not to predict the behavior of the animal in daily life? How am I able to deal with this? How am I able to be at ease with this, to relax in this? So automatically we move into the beliefs. So if we move in the beliefs, we're dependent on the animal. So the animal has to change, or we cannot relate to animals anymore. And the animal can be your husband, it can be your friend, your parents, it doesn't matter. The world is full with animals. So part of what we're doing in this 5 days is kind of, to get to the essence, to see, okay, how am I able to come to a position where I will be at ease with a situation which was shocking, which was painful. How am I able to relax in this? To build the self-confidence that whenever a dog is biting me again, I'm able to deal with it. And this could happen again because it's out of my control. How can we be in a situation where we are at ease with our lives? Because life is so shocking, so often. And we have the self-confidence when life is shocking us that we're able to deal with it. And then every shock we have has an impact, especially when we are not able to move completely through it. And the impact of every shock is dependent on where we are shocked, what moment we are shocked, and how we are shocked. If we are shocked in our feeling of belonging, we are with a group of friends and we are totally relaxed in a state of awareness with it. And there is this deep togetherness. And then at once, we get rejected. It seems that everybody is turning at once against us. And we are pushed out. And we don't understand. So this natural feeling of belonging is shocked at once. And this can be with a group of friends, this can be with one friend, this can be in a relationship, this can be in your family. It will be shocked. We don't belong. And we start to move in the whole movement of acceptance and rejection. And that is a trauma. So the natural feeling of belonging is not there anymore. We need to do something to come back to this feeling. We need to be accepted. And this is the same movement as with the dog. We need to be accepted by the other. We need to be accepted by our friends again. So we have to work hard for it. Not to feel this horrible pain and shock of rejection again. So we give them the authority to reject or accept us. And this is where we start to move more and more in a state of trauma. The trauma tunnel is the illusion that they are the authority of our rejection or our acceptance, of our belonging. So the quality of belonging is all the time there. We do belong. But what's happening is this quality of belonging is unconditional. We get shocked and we start to place conditions on the belonging. And these conditions, which are on the belonging, we partly project on our friends. They have to be loyal. They have to accept us. They have to behave like this and this and this. They're never allowed to reject us. They're not allowed to criticize us because criticism is already a rejection. And we start to create a whole alternate reality. Something happens and we are totally in our innocence. And somebody's accusing us of something we never meant to do, we didn't do, we don't understand how the effect of what we did was there. And we are shocked. And we feel blamed. We did something horrible wrong, but we didn't mean to. We were innocent. We didn't think that this would be the effect. Sometimes just a little bit naughty. A little bit looking for borders. And then somebody really got hurt. And the whole world starts to blame us. How could you do this? Blame. So bad. So we start to move into the whole dimension of guilt and blame. Guilt and accusation. So everything is about guilt and blame. And you see exactly the same. You know, if you're guilty or not guilty, where is the authority? The authority is with the others. They're the master. If you are guilty or not. And when somebody kind of, you know, starts to blame, we blame back so loud and so hard. Because in the end, everything is because of you. Because we cannot bear this guilt. We cannot bear this because it brings us back to the pain which is behind the guilt. This incredible deep feeling of badness. You don't even understand where it's coming from and why. But we were made so bad. We felt so bad. And again, this is another example. There is so many examples of little and bigger traumas we move through in our lives. And every trauma is connected with a shock, a rupture in which first we kind of were able to move from innocence. And after the shock, you know, the whole horizon of our reality is so often colored with guilt and blame. It's a separation. This is the little bit the last part, because this separation, when we look to this is a separation between us and a non-dual quality. So moving through a trauma, moving through a shock, to be able to make the full movement brings us back to the treasure which is there behind it. We master innocence if we're able to contain blame and guilt. It's a duality of innocence. And we're able to contain it, we master innocence. Innocence is able to contain both blame and guilt because there's always innocence in it. It's full of innocence. We master belonging if we're able, from our feeling of belonging, are able to contain acceptance and rejection. Acceptance and rejection becomes a game. It's not serious. Guilt and blame becomes a game. It's not serious. It's not real. It's not really what it is about. What it really is about is innocence and belonging. That's the mastery. So moving through trauma brings us back to the mastery of the quality which has been damaged, where the contraction was placed on, the quality which lost his unconditional status, which became conditional. And this mastery, in a way, these are the lessons of life. This is what we're moving through. This is called karma in India. And this is happening again and again and again and again. These are the repeating states of trauma tunnel, what we hate in ourselves, the insecurity which is unbearable, which comes forward on a regular basis, the fear which is unbearable, which comes forward on a regular basis, the rage which is unbearable, which comes forward on a regular basis, the injustice, the rejection, which is making our life difficult. And of course, the basic attitude we have towards this is to get rid of it. That's it. Get rid of it. Towards ourselves, in the form, don't be so childish. Act as if nothing is happening. Why are you so upset by this? Stop it. If we cannot help ourselves. And towards the world around ourselves. It's not allowed to behave like this. Everybody who's behaving like this should be shot. Or at least be out of my life. Because the pain it gives to me is unbearable. I cannot deal with this. Kill or be killed. So, dealing with the pain, little step by little step, being able to contain the unbearable, brings us back home, brings us back to the shock, the moment before the shock. And that's where, the non-dual quality, which was expressed in the moment that the shock came and which is contracted, becomes free again. And not only in a form, where it's untouched, but in a form where it was touched, where it was damaged. Where we find the self-confidence to trust in this treasure again, unconditional. Because this gives us a feeling of happiness, a feeling of well-being, a feeling of wholeness inside ourselves. And we all know this. We all know this as part of a grief process. We get the shock of losing somebody. And we literally feel that we're ruptured in two. Our heart is ruptured. The pain is unbearable, but slowly we learn to deal with the pain. Not always, but most of the times. And at a certain moment, we build up the self-confidence that we can open up our heart for somebody else again. And when the pain comes again, we are able to deal with it. We have the self-confidence. This is moving completely through a grief process. With all the phases, and it's work. Grieving is hard work. So all the different contractions, which are their non-dual qualities, there are work. They're like grief processes. They look like each other. It's the same process. It's to endure the pain, to build slowly the self-confidence that, to belong to somebody, to love somebody, to open your heart, the joy which gives it, to have this atmosphere of shared love. The togetherness which comes with it is worth it. And we can take the risk because we are able to deal with the pain. So we're free. Start to master love.